The Dallas Cowboys are set to make a big-time move up the board with the NFL draft less than 2 weeks away, and that's exactly what they should do. That and more on today's edition of Locked On NFL.
The new Locked On NFL. The madman Tyler Rowland is your double shot of NFL espresso with the Locked On local experts on every major story. Get ready, Rowland is revving up. The new Locked On NFL starts now. Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Football fans, welcome into the Locked On NFL podcast, bringing you a double dose of the NFL's biggest stories with help from our local experts that know your favorite teams like no one else. I am your host, the madman Tyler Rowland, joined today by Locked On NFL expert Nick Cattles. On today's show, we are going to talk about the 5 teams in the NFL draft that have 2 first-round picks, whether they should trade up, whether they should trade back, what positions they should target, all of that with less than 2 weeks before the NFL draft kicks off. Before we get into all of it, though, do want to thank you for making Locked On NFL your first listen each and every day, and thank you for making the Locked On Podcast Network the #1 sports podcast network. But Nick, I look at the Dallas Cowboys, and of course we'll get into, the picks that they have, what they can do, this and that. But the NFL is just always better when the Dallas Cowboys make big-time moves. When they made the trade for George Pickens, I was hoping that maybe they would, potentially make a deal for Max Crosby, but they made the trades during the season with the Jets and got more guys. Like, the NFL is just better when the Cowboys are shaking it up and not being boring. So that alone, that is my real point out of the gate, is for entertainment purposes. I need the Dallas Cowboys to make a big move and spice up the draft at the top.
Well, Jerry Jones might grant you your wish. You look at what the Cowboys have going into this draft, pick 12 and pick 20. They certainly have the ammunition, if they want to move up and make that big splash in the first round on that Thursday night of the NFL draft. So we'll see if Jerry pulls the trigger. They're an interesting team because, of course, they don't spend a ton of money in free agency. But then, as you mentioned, Tyler, they've made some big trades over the past, 12 months or so, and they're paying those players. So, this is a very, very fascinating situation. It's always compelling with Jerry Jones, and what is he going to do next?
Yeah, I think that for all of Jerry Jones's faults, and no one's perfect, he has been one of the most interesting characters in NFL history and continues to be for however long he's going to want to continue to be, because the Cowboys always shake things up. But look, that's not just us looking for excitement, wanting narrative and all of that stuff. It genuinely does make sense for the Cowboys to move up in the draft, as our guys over at Locked On Cowboys talked about.
All these teams that we're going to talk about, they all have kind of needs that don't necessarily line up with their draft position, right? So that would be a motivating factor for them wanting to trade down a little bit just to try to get value on the player that they're trying to target, right? So,
I could also see, I could also see a situation where they really like Reuben Bain. Yeah. Maybe they feel like 4 is a little rich, but hey, if he's there at 12, that's a much more attainable spot to get up.
Yeah, exactly. So I think for a team like Tennessee, maybe trying to kind of add around Cam Ward a little bit, if you threw them your 12 and your 20, they would probably have to throw a day 2 pick back at you of some sort. It's probably in the 3rd round.
Now, I don't know about that trade offer as a person on the Tennessee side. You're coming up from 12 to 4. We might have to leave out that day 3 pick. But I do think that there are a lot of spots, 3 with Arizona, 4 with Tennessee. I think that the Browns or the Commanders would entertain a trade down as well. I think different guys make sense in different spots, but the Cowboys have the ammunition and they have some extra stuff to work with next year as well. I could see them coming up, and pass rusher seems to be what all the reports are indicating they're interested in.
Well, pass rusher and edge is certainly something that they should be looking at. Linebacker, you can mention cornerback. You could mention really the entire secondary if you want. My question, Tyler, is whether or not they have to move up to get a guy, right? Obviously, any guy you can draft at 12, you can draft at 20, but I don't think it's crazy that maybe somebody falls to them. That they obviously would walk into the first round hoping and praying that Caleb Downs might fall to them because of the position, right? maybe Sonny Styles, even though I find that hard to believe. But even if you sit there at 12, you can look at a Mansour Delane, cornerback out of LSU, somebody who fits a need, who makes a lot of sense at that point on the board, arguably the best cornerback in this draft. So maybe just sit there and wait. I know it's not the sexy, most entertaining thing in the world, but maybe the best advice to Jerry is don't pull that trigger, sit there at 12 and let somebody fall into your lap.
I think it does depend on what they're looking for. If they are more secondary geared, I agree, wait, because I think there's going to be value in the top 3 secondary players, whether that's the 2 cornerbacks and Mansour Delane and Jermon McCoy from Tennessee, who recently ran for scouts and looked pretty good recovering from an ACL injury. He might be a top 5 pick in this draft if he doesn't tear his ACL like people were expecting before the season. Caleb Downs, you mentioned. So those 3 secondary players, I think one of them would be there at 12. But if they are looking for pass rusher, which I think the best players in this draft class, in my opinion, are the pass rushers. You have Arvell Reese, Ruben Bain, David Bailey. That's how I would sort them, my top 3. But there are some who would say David Bailey, Arvell Reese, Ruben Bain. There were some who have Ruben Bain number 1 out of that group. Like, it really is a flavor of the week. I think Ruben Bain may fall just a little bit, so the Cowboys could maybe have more of an inexpensive trade with like the Browns or the Commanders to go get Ruben Bain at 6 or 7, maybe 8 with the Saints, although the Saints are a team without 2 first-round picks that is always looking to be aggressive and move up, so who knows what they could do. But if they did want to take a big swing on David Bailey or Arvell Reese, who, I mean, one of those guys has to be there at 3. Right now, all the winds are saying the Jets are taking David Bailey at 2 now instead of Arvell Reese, and we'll talk about the Jets eventually. But one of them's going to fall to 3, and if the Cardinals were to stick and pick and take a Love or a Sonny Styles or, something like that, if the Cowboys really want one of those 2 guys, then they could make that move up. And I honestly think it's David Bailey. I think David Bailey is the belle of the ball for these NFL teams. The speed, the get off, the length, that inside spin move that David Bailey shows, just absolutely nasty when you put that with the speed that he has in his regular standard rush. If David Bailey is there at 3 or 4, I think the Cowboys, I would say they do make the move up. Like, I'm willing to go that far. I think they do make the move up because Jerry just can't help himself.
The question is, who do you get at 12 and 20 versus who you would get if you moved up into that top 5, right? If you love David Bailey, if you don't care about anything else in the football world on draft night, then getting yourself somebody like Bailey, then you make that move. But if you're the Cowboys, you have to sit back and you've got to think, okay, well, what if I get a Jermon McCoy at 12? And what if I get an Akeem Mesidor at 20, for example? Am I a better football team with Jermon McCoy and Akeem Mesidor than I am with just the individual talent that I traded up to get? That's the biggest question to me. I mean, if you could address 2 big needs with 2 really good football players, it really depends on how you feel, how big of a difference there is between that first, level of edge player, the first 2 or 3 guys, or the other 3 or 4 guys that are going to get drafted probably, from 15 to about 35. What amount of difference is there for you in your evaluation? What are your scouts saying? Do you think Mesidor is a huge drop-off from a Bailey or a Bain? Or do you think Mesidor, even though he's 25 years old, can still give you that juice on the edge and be good enough against the run? And then you land a cornerback at 12 who might be the best corner in this draft. So that's the draft math that you have to do if you're the Cowboys.
And I'm looking at the values, and quite honestly, if they stick at 12 and 20, going secondary and then edge is probably the best way to go. But, because you would have Keldrick Falk or Zion Young or TJ Parker or, like you said, Akeem Mesidor could be in that conversation at 20. And then we talked about the bucket of secondary talent that could be there at 12. That does line up pretty good. Hey, we hit secondary at 12. We come back with edge, defensive line at 20. But if Ruben Bain were to drop to 7 or 8, imagine if they didn't have to give up 20 to move up. Imagine if they gave up, 91 or whatever they have. I know they have an early 90 and then a next year pick to help them move up and keep that 20. If you could get David Bailey and then come back with like a Dylan Thiemann or something like that, it may be harder to get edge or to get secondary at 20. I don't know what the value would be right there. That would be tough for them maybe, but maybe you could trade back from 20 into a range where secondary is more valuable and then recoup some stuff. That way they just have They have so much ammo to do different things. I can't wait to see how creative the Cowboys get. But another team that can get very creative on draft day and needs to is the Kansas City Chiefs, who also are reportedly eyeing a new pass rusher. Do want to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by TurboTax. It's tax time, but for a lot of us, the old way of doing taxes is a lot. Trying to book an appointment that's not the most convenient, sitting in a waiting room with a stack of papers, emailing back and forth, wondering if they really get your situation. But this year, you're getting a major upgrade. Intuit TurboTax now has in-person locations nationwide. You can meet face-to-face with a real tax expert, and your documents get uploaded straight to your TurboTax app on the spot. And just like that, you're done. Your TurboTax expert works to get you every dollar you deserve while you get real-time notifications as you go about your day. It's the relief of walking in, meeting a real person, and walking out knowing that your taxes are being handled right. Head to TurboTax.com/local to find a store near you and book your appointment. All right, Nick, let's continue today's edition of Locked On NFL. Again, we're looking at the 5 teams that have multiple first-round picks in this draft. We talked about the Cowboys. They're set up for a big-time move, trying to add pieces on defense. But now we move to the Kansas City Chiefs, who also have 2 first-round picks after their trade of Trent McDuffie to the Los Angeles Rams. They have 9. They have 29. What will they do with those? It remains to be seen. But again, one thing that we do know, and our guys over at Locked On Chiefs think so as well, the Chiefs need another edge rusher.
I looked at it and I said, okay, you've got all the edges are gone in the top 5, and Messidor goes at 20. You can't get out of this draft. You can't get out of the first round of this draft and Kansas City not have an edge. That's where I sit at this. So to me, you go get TJ Parker and you give up whatever it is you need to give up to go get TJ Parker, and that's what we did. So in my opinion, if you can't get an edge at 9, you have to move up and go get that done.
I think that's a strong opinion on Kansas City, but when you look at what they have at edge, we've been talking about this. I hit it in my AFC West check-in. They have George Karlaftis. Chris Jones is slowing down, but outside of that, I do not like the defensive line depth. Their first rounder from 2023, Felix Ozama, has done absolutely nothing. I don't think I've ever heard his name called in any capacity. Ashton Gillette, the 3rd rounder last year, good player, but is that really what you want your starting pass rusher to be if you're the Chiefs and you have Super Bowl aspirations? We talk about the Cowboys going up for an edge, but the Chiefs at number 9 with their roster and their situation, they're the team who I'm like, hey, they could go up to number 3 and get that other pass rusher.
They could. You know, there's a couple of other ways to look at this, though. The idea of getting pressure on the quarterback, many people will tell you that the best, most effective way to get pressure on the quarterback is actually on the interior of the defensive line. So, you know, you might wait until 29 to draft a defensive lineman and say, well, I feel like a Caden McDonald, for example, out of Ohio State. Now, I know he's not a great pass rusher at this moment, and he's really defined by his run defense, but many people will tell you that's somebody that has a pretty nasty demeanor, somebody who has a motor, somebody who is also shown flashes of being able to get up the field with a pass rush. So maybe you think you can create that interior pass rush, or maybe you like the guys that could be there at the end of the first round. The TJ Parkers. TJ Parker might be there at 29. Zion Young. You know, there's a bunch of other names. Malachi Lawrence we can throw out there. Maybe Cassius Howell. Maybe Cassius Howell falls to 29 because of the arm length question. So I think in a perfect world, if you're Kansas City, again, I hate to be the boring one here, but maybe sitting at 9 is best. You know, who knows if Ruben Bain slips to 9? He could slip to 9. Yeah. He could slip to 10. He could slip outside the top 10. This draft is so unpredictable, Tyler. I think we can look at positions and guess that positions might go in certain spots. But as far as the names that go with those positions, very, very difficult. And I'd also wonder, are you looking at cornerback? That's another need to me for the Chiefs. Maybe you like Mansour Delane, aforementioned with the Cowboys. Maybe you like him at 9. And then we get back to the game with every team when we have 2 picks in the first round. How much are you willing to give up to move up?
You know, when you talk about interior defensive line, that's why I think that Ruben Bain may be a better fit than people realize for Kansas City. A lot of people think because of the arm length concerns and because of the physical and the physicality and the hands, man, just anvils for hands, Ruben Bain could replace a Chris Jones. And Chris Jones had some versatility coming in. Everybody thinks, interior defensive line, and that's what he is. But Chris Jones had the length and the movement ability to play as a heavy end if you really needed him to. And that could be, Ruben Bain could be the successor there. But I also go to this name. This is one of the most, just a side topic, one of the most interesting names in the NFL draft to me is Caleb Banks out of Florida. He has everything you could ever want from explosiveness and length, and he's 6'6", and just could absolutely wreck everything, but there's some injury concerns and things like that. Caleb Banks could be a guy in that 29 range if he falls a little bit. He has concerns, but he's got first-round talent, and I would be shocked to see somebody in Kansas City has been a team that's known to, hey, we'll take a chance with injury. We'll take a chance with different things to get the most talented guys on the team, so that could be an option as well. You're right, it is boring, but you do have to balance the value of having both of those. Now, they could move up from 9 to get their pass rusher du jour and not give up 29 in that package that, most teams don't have 2 first-round picks when they make a move up, so that could be a possibility as well. But everybody does say next year's draft, which everyone says every year, it feels like next year's draft is going to be a great draft, but 2027 is seriously supposed to be a fantastic draft, so maybe they wouldn't want to give up anything in the future.
Yeah, and maybe you think if you're Kansas City sitting there at 29, maybe that's the spot you do take a Zion Young, because he's a guy that a lot of people don't necessarily believe has the pass rush juice from the outside. Some believe that he's going to be more effective as a pass rusher if you move him inside. If that's the evaluation of the player, maybe you draft him at 29 and you just move him inside. And let's not forget, Patrick Mahomes coming off the ACL, Rashee Rice, all the questions off the field. I know the NFL cleared him of his most recent stuff going on, but there's plenty of baggage there. There could be something. There could be something there at 9, Tyler. Maybe you love a Mekhi Lemon and you say to yourself, we just want to get a weapon, somebody who we can trust. Let's draft Mekhi Lemon from USC and put him with Patrick Mahomes and help our quarterback out. So there's so many different things that you can do.
No, I agree 100%. 9 is a good spot for what Kansas City needs. Something good is going to fall to them there, but if they're just smitten by somebody and want to make the move, I could see that too. 29, offensive tackle. I'm just so curious to see the offensive tackle runs. I am not a big believer in Jalen Moore. They let, Juwan Taylor go. He gets scooped up by the Falcons after Caleb McGarry kind of retires in a somewhat surprise move, I would say. So getting an offensive tackle to eventually be the full-time right tackle, that could be an interesting move for Kansas City as well. They have a ton of options. But with that being said, another team with a lot of options is actually number 2, the New York Jets. And we've been talking about trade up. But my guy John Butchko from Locked On Jets thinks that the Jets should actually trade down from number 2.
When I say that I like to see the Jets trade down, I know people disagree with that because people look at the 2 first-round picks this year, the 2 second-rounders this year. They look at the 3 first-rounders next year. But I think the Jets need as much currency as possible. And I think the best of both worlds is trading down and adding extra picks because, as the question mentioned, there is a cost to the Jets using multiple picks on a quarterback. And that's, you can't find projects at other positions to try and develop. So if you add extra picks, you can kind of do both. You can maximize your chances of hitting on a quarterback, and you can still find developmental prospects that you try and bring along at other spots on the field. And I think it's important for the Jets to be able to do both.
I actually love this move for the Jets because I am not high on the top of this first round. Like David Bailey, Arvell Reese, Ruben Bain, Jeremiah Love. I think these guys would be mid-first round picks in a normal talent level draft class. I don't think that a lot of these guys are top 5 worthy. I like Carnell Tate. He's not a top 10 worthy wide receiver to me, but he's going to have to go in the top 10 because this draft class doesn't have the premium highlight. There's no Myles Garrett. You know what I mean? There's no Joe Alt, Malik Neighbors. There aren't that kind of level of player at the top. So if I'm the Jets and we talk about the Cowboys, the Chiefs, these teams being gung-ho to get a pass rusher, all these teams with multiple first-round picks, if I'm the Jets, I'm like, why would none of these guys I got to stick and pick. I can't move off. If I get a great deal and I'm the Jets, I'm going to move down again.
Yeah, I think it depends on the eval, right? Like if you're sitting there at number 2 and the Jets believe that Arvell Reese, for example, is the best player in this draft, because frankly, you could pick the best player in this draft. I don't know a lot of people who believe Fernando Mendoza is actually the number one player in this draft, right? He's the number one quarterback in this draft. But if you're the Jets and you feel like Arvell Reese is that guy, I know some people, I think this is a stretch. They want to bring up Micah Parsons because of the versatility of Arvell Reese, and they think that he has the potential to, have a ton of pass rush juice off the edge and also be, an off-ball linebacker if need be and all that stuff. And like he's twitchy, he's super fluid, very good tackler. If you believe that he's that guy, if you believe that he has that versatility and he's the best player in this draft, then you take him at 2 and you don't even think twice. But if you are the Jets and you feel like Tyler Rowland and you're saying, I don't know if any of these guys would be a top 5 pick in any other year, then yeah, absolutely. You put that pick up for sale and you see what you can get. But I would not be desperate to move out of the 2 hole, no matter what draft I'm talking about, because if you do your homework, you should land a really, really good football player.
Yeah, the Jets shouldn't take a discount even if they want to move back, because at the end of the day, with Mendoza going 1 and then no other quarterback really worthy of that kind of top selection, you are basically auctioning off the number 1 pick in the draft. Like, that's how the Jets should view it. The quarterback is gone. Everybody knew that was always the thing. No one's coming up for a quarterback. So this is the number 1 position player in the draft, and they should definitely get a deal like that. But that's why I think it's possible, because they might get an incredible deal from a team with multiple first-round picks. They could have 3 first-round picks in back-to-back drafts. That's the way that you rebuild your roster, and knowing that they probably won't end up with 3 first-round picks next year, because they're going to have to make a move for a quarterback at some point. But I just think that would be a solid move for the Jets based on my read of the top of the draft class. But there are 2 other teams that have multiple first-round picks in the NFL draft: the Cleveland Browns, the Miami Dolphins. A lot of interesting routes that they can go. Do want to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by Indeed. Workplace chaos, deadlines stacking up, your inbox is overflowing, and the one position that you have to fill is still sitting open. When the pressure's on, you need the right hire. That's a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs. Indeed Sponsored Jobs helps you reach the people who actually fit what you're looking for with the skills, experience, and location, so you're not just hoping the right candidate stumbles across your post. Spend less time searching and more time actually interviewing candidates who check all your boxes with less stress, less time, and more results. When you need the right person to cut through the chaos, that's a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs. Listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to help give your job the premium status it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. Just go to Indeed.com/podcast right now and support my show by saying that you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire. That's a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs. All right, Nick, let's cap off today's edition of Locked On NFL. Again, looking at the teams who have multiple first-round picks in the NFL draft, what they might do, what they could do. Before we finish, do want to thank you again for making Locked On NFL your first to listen each and every day. And thank you for making the Locked On Podcast Network the #1 sports podcast network. But with that being said, again, the next team that I want to talk about here is the Miami Dolphins. The Miami Dolphins have pick number 11. Their second pick is pick number 30 that they got from the Denver Broncos. They have a lot of needs on that team, but primary among them, I think offensive line and wide receiver. I think secondary could add some help as well. They have a lot of value in those places, but I don't know that Miami needs to be a team that needs to trade up and make a play for somebody. I think they're the type of team that one of those wide receivers, one of the cornerbacks, the secondary guys that we talked about, one of the offensive linemen, like they're in a good spot where one good option out of those buckets will fall to them.
Yeah, somebody should fall. And let's all be honest here. It's not like Miami is 1 or 2 players away. You don't want to take that big swing. You're not the Dallas Cowboys who are just thirsting for a championship at this point. You understand your lot in life. You've got, I don't know, $17 billion in dead cap space this year sitting there on the cap. You're just going to deal with and kick the can down the road. So you understand the situation that you're in. And if I'm Miami, hey, man, maybe Mansour Delane drops. Maybe Jamad McCoy drops. Maybe Ruben Bain drops. Maybe I eye somebody like Mekhi Lemon, who I brought up last segment, to replace a Jalen Waddle or help replace Jalen Waddle's productivity in that pass game and give Malik Willis somebody who can actually catch the football. I would also not be surprised. You mentioned the offensive line. How about offensive tackle Francis Mawanoa from Miami? That's somebody who could easily be there at number 11, 6'5.5", 329, 33.25-inch arms, agile, good anchor. So maybe you just sit there and you stick and pick at number 11. And if you're Miami, again, outside of maybe running back, there's really no position you look at and say, well, we wouldn't draft that guy, right? You're in a position of need pretty much everywhere because you're trying to upgrade your football team and get ready for 2027, 2028. So I would not be rushing to get rid of those picks or try to move up in desperation. And at 30, similar conversation we just had, right? If you're sitting there at 30 and you're saying to yourself, like the Chiefs are, hey, maybe one of those edge guys drops. Maybe I believe that a TJ Parker is more 2024 TJ Parker than 2025 TJ Parker when the entire Clemson program fell off a cliff. Maybe you feel that way. So I think they have a lot of options. And if I'm Miami, I'm sitting there and I'm hoping, some really good talent falls to me at 11. And then I pick my best player available at 30.
And I look at the secondary. I think whether it's a Avion Terrell or a Colton Hood or a Brandon Cisse or a Chris Johnson, for example, I think Traden Stukes has been getting some first-round buzz as of late, which I think is crazy. Personally, I think he's a good player, but first round's crazy to me. But either way, you could fill one of those needs, and I think there's a good bucket of talent in the secondary that will be available. Because I look at their secondary, and I'm like, oh, boy, like if they went Caleb Downs or Dylan Thiemann and then followed it up with a cornerback, I wouldn't – I wonder if they take wide receiver, and here's why. John Eric Sullivan, the new general manager, is a Green Bay guy. And Green Bay took Matthew Golden in the first round. They finally did what everybody wanted them to do. But Green Bay has traditionally been a money ball team at wide receiver where they just throw a ton of resources at it, but mid-round resources, and wait for a couple of those guys to pop. A couple of these guys are going to make it. So I wonder if they take receiver, but my guy Kyle Krabs from Locked On Dolphins, he is convinced about at least one wide receiver, Jordan Tyson, won't be a Miami Dolphin.
The Jordan Tyson, who's from Arizona State, he is the most physically gifted wide receiver in the class. I think he's going to have that disqualifier for pick number 11. If he gets there to 30 and it's a BPA option, kind of like what Will Johnson did with the Cardinals last year at corner, and you're like, man, he's here this late, we might as well, right? The talent is undeniable with Jordan Tyson. I think he's the most complete profile. I think he's got prolific ball skills. He's 6'2". He brings plenty of mass at 203. You love the way he tracks the football, the body control, the run after catch. He's got good speed. It's great. But there's a laundry list of durability questions that have existed on his resume that are only getting further compounded by the fact that he has a hamstring that's preventing him from doing any pre-draft testing. So we're nicked up all year last year. We skipped the combine. Now we skipped the pro day because of a hamstring. There's medical stuff in the background. It's a lot of risk for a team that's trying to put that chapter of their franchise behind.
And that is the gambit with Jordan Tyson. Jordan Tyson is personally my number one wide receiver. I don't care about the injuries. I'm betting on the talent. He looks elite, in my opinion, when you watch him on tape. I'm not as high on Carnell Tate as others. Mekhi Lemon, good player. I just don't think he has the pop that Jordan Tyson does. I like Casey Concepcion a lot too. I'm in love with him. Would you take how far would Jordan Tyson have to fall for you to take a chance on him is basically what it comes down to.
Yeah, it's a great question. I actually just did an episode of Locked On Patriots on Jordan Tyson and whether or not I would take him at 31. And I actually lean towards no. And it's not because the talent. I know it's not because the talent, but man,
I know
maybe I'm way too conservative here. But if I spend the 31st pick on a guy that has that type of injury history, and he ends up getting tweaked the first 6 weeks of the season, I'm going to be sitting there going, oh my God, I can't believe I did it. I pulled the trigger. Right. I took the ultimate game. Talent-wise, it's undeniable. And again, I understand I might be going crazy because I said, hey, look, if Jordan Tyson falls to 31, that'd be interesting within itself because that would be a tumble.
That's a statement.
some people think that he's tumbling, and could get past the 20 range. I personally think he's going to get picked in the top 20. But if you're asking me as a GM, and I'm going to put all my chips in the middle of the table and draft somebody in the first round that has that injury history, I would right now lean no. And I know it might backfire. I might never hear the end of it. But of course, that's how this works. If he gets injured multiple times in his first year and a half, 2 years, then you look like a genius for not spending that first round pick on the guy. So, yeah, man, he is such a conundrum. And that's going to be a dilemma. If he continues to fall down the board, which team is willing to pull the trigger? I saw something on Thursday, Tyler, that made a lot of sense. The mention of the Philadelphia Eagles and how Howie Roseman might be looking to move up. He's like the perfect dude, right? Especially if you're going to end up trading A.J. Brown. You make that move up. Everybody thinks you're the best GM in football, so you have you have that leeway to make a move like that. And then you draft a Jordan Tyson and then watch the guy go off for the Eagles for the next decade.
It's all too predictable is what it is at the end of the day. But speaking of a conundrum, the running back conundrum, Jeremiah Love, where's he going to go? We finished with the Cleveland Browns, who have pick 6, pick 24. And my guy Spencer German from Locked On Browns talked about recently, could the Browns take Love at 6 if he fell?
Why would they take Jeremiah Love? And here's the thing. Jeremiah Love is going to be a fantastic player at the next level in my estimation. He's one of the only players in this group, this class, that's considered a blue chipper. Most experts and analysts have him top 2 in terms of where he sort of falls in terms of the player that he is, the caliber that he brings to the table. He's fantastic. And so if the Browns took him, I would understand it from that standpoint because he is that good of a player. If it was me, I think Jeremiah Love falling feels like it should be a perfect opportunity to trade back because somebody will talk themselves into, Jeremiah Love and the talent that he brings to the table in our offense, I love the idea of that. Let's go up and get him. I think that could happen.
The Browns are another team where I think they're better off trading back. I don't think the Browns need to move up or do anything crazy. Again, they're very far away from contention. They want to hold their assets to get a quarterback. If I'm the Browns, you have a lot of roster holes, a lot of uncertainty on offense. I'm trading back and trying to fill slots differently.
Yeah, trade out of 6 would make a whole lot of sense, right?
Yeah.
You're probably looking at a Cornell Tate, for example. Maybe you say, I think Jeremiah Love's the best player in this draft. I think he is the best player in this draft, bar none. I think he has future Hall of Fame talent. I think he'd be a stud in any draft that we talk about. But of course, it's the positional value at running back that really hurts teams, thinking about drafting him in the top 5 or 6. If there's a team that's hungry to move on up and draft the Jeremiah Love, then Cleveland should take advantage of it.
Yeah, no, you're 100% right. How high would you take Jeremiah Love if you're the Cardinals? Would you do it?
No, I mean, I think if you're a team that is not necessarily contending or even borderline competitive, I'd have a really tough time drafting a running back that high, even though I think he's the best player in the draft. It's just such a critical decision that you've got to make. But we've seen a lot of running backs make a difference and make an impact and not be drafted in the first round, let alone the first 5 or 6 picks. So I love Jeremiah Love, but if I'm sitting there in the top 10 somehow, like if I'm the Chiefs and I didn't sign Kenneth Walker and I felt like, hey, this is the opportunity to put a Jeremiah Love with a Patrick Mahomes and get more out of my quarterback and make this offense better. And we're not too far away from, challenging for a championship. That's the type of team that I'm looking at to make that kind of a pick. But if you're these teams in the top 5, 6, 7, then I'm probably against it. And if I can move out and get extra picks, I'm doing it.
All I know is if you're right and he's a Hall of Famer, I'm picking him. I don't care where my team's at or whether we're good or bad. I'm picking the Hall of Famer. That's what I'm doing. So if a GM feels like that, position be damned. I'm taking the guy. You know what I mean? Like that is something that you simply can't pass on. But less than 2 weeks away, folks. We are heading towards the draft. Cannot wait to see how it all plays out. And we're going to keeping things live here on the Locked On NFL podcast. I am your host, the Madman Tyler Rowland, for my co-host, Nick Cattles, as we tell you every single episode. Thanks for tuning in and stay safe out there.